Joe Mullings from 160 Studios in Delray Beach. My guest today is John Carlson. John is president of Flex Health Solutions. John, thanks for joining us.
Joe, nice to be here.
You just mentioned you're out in San Jose right now watching the smoke roll in. How is everybody out there?
It's been an interesting 6 months for everybody. The last couple of months have been crazy between fires and everything else going on. Generally, our family and our employees are all safe, but it is a crazy time to work through.
It's a crazy, crazy time. So you lead Flex, the Health Solutions division, and you've been there since 2016. What does the Health Solutions division include within the Flex organization?
So as you look at Flex Health Solutions, we're about a little over $2 billion division of a $26 billion company. We provide design and manufacturing services for most of the medical device companies and most of the pharma companies. We produce for them everything from simple diagnostic catheters to complex immunoassay machines. We do design of simple products to very complex devices within there. And it gives us a great vantage point to see into the broad sets of the medical device industry, some of the challenges they face and some of the opportunities that are in front of them.
Flex also does quite a bit of work in life science, consumer, as well as medtech, and we're seeing that convergence right now, and I think it's wonderful for the industry where consumer products are starting to overlay onto medtech, or starting to overlay onto just general home products, and we're bringing new thought and new innovation in from a supply chain perspective, as well as process and materials. Does that give Flex an advantage?
So I think there's one other element that I'd bring into that, which is the consumerization of those products, the look and feel of the medical devices. I spent my whole career designing medical products, and for the most part, they look like they're designed by engineers for engineers. And what you're seeing with the consumerization is bringing in that design intent, that design philosophy of a more consumer-looking product in terms of intuitive use and how it's used into it. Given Flex's broad support of multiple different industries, we're in a unique position to help our customers understand how you bring those products into it, how you think in that design life cycle standpoint. So a consumer product will live in the marketplace for 12 to 18 months. Medical devices, will live in the marketplace for 18 to 24 years. Mm-hmm. And so how do you bring that concept of rapid innovation, of continuous improvement into it in a way that allows customers to think differently? And for medical device manufacturers, that challenges how they think about setting up manufacturing, how they think about managing the life cycle, how they think about the design process associated with it. I think we've seen a lot of the non-traditional companies coming into the space and really challenging how FDA looks at those products and bringing in a different way of approving those technologies, of really understanding how do you bring broad technology to a mass market to give people benefits of that. I think everyone's seen the success Apple's had in bringing those capabilities into it. And we see many other customers that Flex supports in those lifestyle or consumer products trying to make that step into it. We're fortunate in that we can help those companies understand that step from a consumer product to a regulated device. There are a number of things they have to build into it. And so helping them understand the investments required to do that. How do you set up the appropriate quality systems? How do you set up the right manufacturing processes? So what you get is a good quality device that meets the expectations of the patients or consumers and satisfies the requirements of all the global regulations. So it is an exciting time to see these technologies coming together. And there's just tremendous amounts of information we can provide to allow clinicians to make far better decisions.
Yeah, and you came up through J&J. You were worldwide VP of R&D for the Ethicon Endosurgery, and I know you also had some oversight on LifeScan and Animas. So you've seen quite a few different product portfolios. Now, Animas and LifeScan being in the diabetic marketplace had a consumer touch to it. Certainly, the Ethicon Endosurgery, not so much, right? A consumer's not worrying about what a stapler is doing or a minimally invasive device. What has been your perspective over the last few years coming out of a J&J, and again, granted, having a consumer feel to it, the influence of the consumer design in the market, the influence of, and then supply chain. I want you to take me there as well, because Flex is as much of a design development house as it is a supply chain expert, if there is one in medtech.
That's correct. So a lot of it comes down to the expected life cycle of a product. So if you think about most consumer products you experience, they will have a total life cycle of less than 24 months. That's from inception of the idea of the product to the end of the manufacturing life cycle of it. So it typically goes through a design cycle, gets mass marketed for the Christmas season, goes a little bit in the next year, and the product is gone. That requires a pace of development, a discipline, and a rhythm that is an order of magnitude faster than medical device companies go. In up till very recently, that was accepted in the marketplace, that it just took longer to do that. I think what's become more evident in the last few years is you can meet those regulatory and clinical burdens and go faster. And I think if we saw anything over the last couple of months with the COVID experience, it's the need for medical device companies to be able to ramp very quickly to satisfy market needs. And there's been tremendous learnings for money companies on how to do that. But as you said, a lot of that comes down to the supply chain. Can you get to the suppliers who have the components necessary when you need them? Can they ramp fast enough? Can they supply into it? Do they have the quality systems at that sub-tier supplier to meet the requirements to do those pieces? And being in Flex, one of the great things is we have a truly global supply chain. And so we have suppliers, what I talk about folks about is we have redundant capabilities in supply chain across North America, Europe, or Asia. So we can source truly globally for what we're trying to solve for our customers. Having spent a lot of my career in R&D, what you find in most of the OEMs is that your supply chain is generally within 100 miles of your R&D center. It's people you know, it's people you've worked with, you've got trusted relationships with them. The challenge with that is you're generally not seeing what world-class supply chain capabilities look like. And so the ability to bring a different view of supply chain to that, and particularly when you look at it from a consumer standpoint, where you'll go from 0 devices to 1 million very rapidly, and then immediately go back to 0 again. There's a different set of agility that's required to do that, a different set of disciplines and skills.
So when I think of supply chain in the classic medical device world, and I think of a partner, a contract design, contract manufacturer, full-on partner, I think of extruded tubing. I think of thin film. I think of secondaries. I think of all that. Now, just a few years ago, Flex spun out BrightInsight. And I've been fascinated with Cal and Jamie and that team over there on what they're doing. For those that don't know, BrightInsight is a platform for connectivity on connected devices in medtech. You'll do a better job of explaining it than I will. Can you share with those who might not be familiar with what I believe is the next level of partnering and building platforms for supply chain on digital?
So if you think about where BrightInsight came from, one of the nice things about being in Flex is we were able to bridge connected devices into healthcare because we were manufacturing connected devices for multiple industries. There was a clear notion that medical devices could be enhanced if you could get the information from the device to the cloud, process it, and then give that back to the patient or caregiver or clinician in a way with some insight associated with it. And so we saw many of our customers starting to develop these smart and connected devices. But we also saw all of them struggling with, okay, now if I have the device, how do I actually get the data from where it is to the cloud and get it back? And oh, by the way, as soon as I do that, there's a whole bunch of rules and regulations I have to meet. There's privacy requirements, there's security requirements, there's FDA requirements, because as that data is moving back and forth and the decisions being made, it becomes part of the care or the device that you're developing. And then you couple that with all the global regulations around it. We saw our customers from med device companies to large pharma companies all struggling to do this. And we saw an opportunity where as a partner, we could build this connection. Cal will describe it as the plumbing. So you don't really care how it gets from here to here as long as it gets there appropriately. So the notion of BrightInsight was to come in and fill that need in the marketplace. And Cal brought in a team who tried to build those things at pharma companies before. I had done it at a device company. We had a lot of experience and shared pieces within there. We saw an opportunity if we could create this service for people to allow them to smoothly get the data from the device to the cloud and then back to where it needs to be, taking care of all the logistics in between there, it would create a tremendous amount of value. It would allow our customers to focus their efforts on the things that will actually make a difference, which is getting that clinical insight to a decision maker who can change the therapy or change the behavior of the patient. And so that was the notion behind it. And what we've seen is just tremendous uptake in the marketplace. To have a platform that they can use that is secure, that has the regulatory parts, that understands privacy, that can handle the data movement between there, and is an open architecture system so that you can incorporate lots of different sources of data into it in a very seamless fashion. Unlike some of the other systems we've seen, which are very proprietary, it'll work with their devices, but no one else's. And if you take the classic example of diabetes, you have a patient who's typically on 2 to 3 different therapeutics. They're using a range of devices to treat that. what we saw in the marketplace was that patient would have to go into 5 or 6 different data collection means to try to get any view of it. And if you're a clinician in your office, there is no way you're going to go to 4 or 5 different places to get the data on that patient. So the ability to aggregate that seamlessly, to create a platform for that, was sort of the idea behind BrightInsight. And as you say, it's taking out tremendous barriers in the marketplace and creating whole new opportunities for caring for patients.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense to me. Is that conversation came up a number of years ago in 15 or 16 when I was working with Scott Hunnekens and we were building Verb together. And that thought of having that, just a platform, why not have all the robotics companies connected on a platform? Why not have the convergence of intelligence on all of the devices that, should be in harmony and a chorus together for patient care, and spend money on one platform as a utility? How about if I'm a startup? How empowering is that BrightInsight if I'm a startup who needs to have that capability, yet I don't have any more than a $15 or $20 million round I brought in? Is that a potential, can I buy space on that type of technology in order to develop my system?
So there's 2 things on it. Certainly, I think BrightInsight's open to all customers who come within there. It's certainly from a startup standpoint, having someone provide that service for you is a huge advantage. Mm-hmm. And so I think they would have to work with Cal and the team to figure out what is the right business model for them to do that, to connect their devices to it, get the data moving in the right direction, and then what are the right top-end partner services to offer them. So once you have this connectivity, you can then have partners with data analytics companies that sit on top of that. So there's a lot that the BrightInsight can bring together. And for a startup, if you really are focusing on getting that patient outcome, having that platform to leverage is a huge starting point for them. But to be honest, where they're seeing the most traction is with the large pharma and large device companies, because they've all tried to do this and they've all struggled to make it work for them. And typically you find it gets pigeonholed into their IT department, mm-hmm. which is not the right place to be thinking about this. It is a product. It has design requirements. It has to have design intent behind it. It has to have all those regulations met for it. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity for BrightInsight.
Agreed. So I want to go back to supply chain. I want to chat about that in the pandemic environment. And, we could have never been prepared for what has come upon us. And certainly organizations have responded exceptionally well, others not so much. How does Flex view the emerging world of supply chain? Does that have us slide into more of a nationalist mindset? Are we away from a borderless environment? Will we look at it as a national security sort of conversation? What are your thoughts there? Because healthcare is healthcare. And to me, that's a national security subject.
So I think if you look at healthcare in general, for a long time, it's been governed by World Trade Organization. So it was outside of most of the nationalistic trade agreements that existed within there, because every country wanted to make sure their people had access to the technologies necessary for healthcare. So from that standpoint, healthcare has been great from a global trade environment. I think what the pandemic exposed was 2 things. One was that various countries took various approaches to how they closed their borders or tried to control the spread of the virus within there. And as you had countries shutting down their borders or sending everyone home and closing down the factories, you saw massive disruption in supply chain occurred within there. So 2 things happened. One is that countries started to realize that they couldn't get access to medical devices. That was a huge issue for their population. And so there's a lot of incentives being talked about to regionalize the manufacturing so that they're not as subject to these variations. From an OEM standpoint, what they saw was that their supply chains were very fragile. So if you lost the ability to source a product because Malaysia shut down its borders, all of a sudden you couldn't deliver care to a whole bunch of people. Mm-hmm. And so you could try to fix that through carrying tons of inventory, but that's very inefficient. Or you could look to say, okay, how do I diversify my supply chain and recognize that I may need redundant sources of supply within there? Where Flex came into it is for our existing customers and even medical companies that aren't our customers. They came to us and said, can you help us find these components? Can you reach into your network and find them? And so we did that with a number of ventilator companies. When ventilators were the big issue that was out there, we were not only ramping them for ourselves, for our customers, but also helping people who weren't our customers secure supply chain for those pieces. We were able to go in because of our global presence and get a small supplier in Malaysia identified as critically needed for healthcare standpoint. So even though the Malaysian government had shut down all manufacturers, we would get them designated as essential because one of their components was necessary to support a medical product in another part of the world. So our visibility in countries, as well as our connections into the governments, allowed us to break down walls that our customers couldn't see, because typically these weren't their top tier suppliers. These were 2 or 3 levels down. But at the end of the day, if you're short one component, you can't make the device. And it paralyzed folks. And so we were able to do that and leverage our skills and capabilities, but also help our customers understand, how do you build in the resiliency into your supply chain? And when you're dependent upon a small supplier who's 100 miles down the road, but has no ability to do these things, you can become paralyzed. And so as you think about this nationalizing of healthcare, I think what every country is going to want to understand is, where is their vulnerability? How do they help protect themselves with it? And so I think as our customers look at it, historically, medical device manufacturing has been single site manufacturing for global distribution. That maximizes the efficiency of your manufacturing. It helps with a lot of logistics around that, but it also makes you very susceptible to changes. And so, we're fortunate that we have, from a medical standpoint, 25 factories scattered across the globe. So we can very quickly turn on different parts of the world. We also have another 75 factories inside of Flex, so we have great footprint. Many of our customers don't have that regional flexibility. And so finding the right partnership between what's done inside the OEMs, what's done with partners, can give them tremendous flexibility in how they do it. The other thing we're able to demonstrate is, because of the breadth and scale that we do things at, we can very rapidly scale. We can go from 0 to very high volume production and back to 0 faster than most of our customers can think about, how do I even start to add this capacity into my network? So there's just a lot of flexibility that you can do from a partnership standpoint.
You've been involved in the diabetic market. You've been involved in minimally invasive surgery. You're involved with a cloud-based technology with BrightInsight. What are you keeping your eyes on for the next 24 to 48 months in medtech from a product perspective, and how much influence will the consumer now have in their health decisions?
I'll put that into 2 buckets. One of those is going to be what I'll call remote diagnostic, remote monitoring, remote care. Simple things. If you look at over the last 6 months, the decline in cancer diagnosis, the decline in heart attacks being treated in the ERs, that's not because cancer has changed. That's not because heart attacks aren't happening. It's because people are afraid to go into the healthcare system today because of fear of COVID and other reasons. So this ability to meet patients where they need to be is going to cause a huge influx in the ability to do remote diagnostic, remote testing, remote support of patients within there. That's where the consumerization is going to come in, because people are going to demand access to those things. If you look at the growth in telemedicine in the last 6 months, it's been beyond what anybody forecasted. It's what everybody hoped for, but it's finally occurred. You couple that with the ability to have remote data that's coming into it, you can now have a very good clinical experience done through a medium like this. Those technologies, I think, are going to continue to drive us forward. I don't think we're going to go backwards from that. And so the question is, how do you continue to advance that? The second thing I look at from a consumerization is the impact of robotic surgery is having in the marketplace. Obviously, it started with Intuitive, and they did a fantastic job of sort of creating the notion of what that looks like. But increasingly, patients are going to want the comfort that they've got the most advanced technologies being used in their care and treatment. And so you saw this again beginning with Intuitive, where patients were calling up the hospital and asking, do you have a robot? And if they didn't, the patient was selecting another place. Well, that's now expanded from abdominal surgery into orthopedics and into other specialties. There's going to be this expectation that patients have, is they should have access to the most advanced technology to ensure the best possible outcome. So the more that there's a consumerization of healthcare, the more patients become informed on it, the more they're going to demand access to certain capabilities. Now, that's a bit of a US-centric view of it. And I used to think that until I actually spent a lot of time in China, and I saw the same dynamics happening in China, where people who had the ability to were selecting the most advanced care possible, even in those situations. So I think those are the 2 dynamics, which is, how do you support that patient getting care where they want it to be? At the same time, how do you make sure they have access to the most advanced technologies so that they're as comfortable as they can be in their procedures?
Yeah, my hypothesis is, over the next 24 to 36 months, there'll be more change in how healthcare is delivered, as you just answered the question, through telemedicine and sort of virtual engagement and the monitoring side. And I love to see the patient empowered, because we will now drive solutions back through the doctor. Because most physicians, I will tell you that, other than the world-class ones in the top 5% are not aware of the tech in medtech as you and I are. And it's a little scary. And I think patients now are going to be, and consumers in general, are going to be caring more about what's going on in healthcare, life sciences, and the new heroes may be people in medtech and life sciences, not necessarily athletes in professional sports. We can only hope for that.
That would be a fantastic outcome.
Wouldn't it? Well, John, I appreciate your time today. I know you're going to be pretty active in the AdvaMed MedTech conference coming up. Anything in particular you're going to be keeping your eyes peeled for?
From my standpoint, it's understanding where our customers are, the major OEMs, and how do we partner with them to address, as you call it, a very dynamically changing marketplace within there. What are the technology trends that they're looking at? And again, from my perspective, having spent a lot of time in the med device community, the technology in med device is usually 5 to 7 years behind other industries. And so how do we help them leapfrog where they think the capabilities are to where they really are, and help them move faster into these spaces? So the more we can bring together these cross-industry insights to help the med tech companies move faster to get the patients where they want to be, that's what gets me excited. And seeing the companies that are investing in that, those become the great places.
Yeah, I've got to say the investments being sort of liberated right now into med tech are going to make us for the golden years over the next 5 to 10. Just my humble opinion.
Excellent. Yeah. I agree.
Well, I appreciate your time. Listen, stay safe out in San Jose.
Joe, very nice meeting you.
Same. And I'll see you at the MedTech conference over the next week or two, virtually at least.
Very good. Thank you.
This is Joe Mullings from 160 Studios. Take care.